Our top story today, a historic election setback for Japan's ruling party. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba says he will stay in office despite his coalition looking set to lose its upper house majority. Broadcaster NHK says the Liberal Democratic Party and longtime partner Komeito lost 19 seats overall as voters protested over a cost of living crunch. This would be the first time since 1955 that the LDP has to govern without controlling either chamber of parliament. Ishiba is expected to address the election outcome in about 2 hours. Market participants have been concerned that a further weakening of his leadership will nudge the coalition into giving concessions to the opposition. With stock and bond markets closed in Japan today, in focus is the yen. Avril Hong is here with a closer look. And Avril, a moderate bounce in the yen, but it could be short-lived.
I think that's the assessment for most investors after this historic setback for the ruling coalition, a setback for Prime Minister Ishiba. We're seeing stock futures edging lower and a bounce in the Japanese currency to as high as 147.8 against the greenback. But this is mostly seen as a sell the fat kind of response, expected to be short-lived, any of these gains against the backdrop of investors really assessing the election outcome, but also any outcome from trade talks to come. And some see yet more yen volatility and trading in a range of 145 to 150 against the greenback this week. Now, flip the board. Among the concerns for investors, let's just rake through some of that, is how the election result might ultimately mean a weakened position for Japanese officials going into trade talks. It could also leave it trickier for the BOJ to provide any sort of timeline guidance for the next rate hike. And then while Prime Minister Ishiba has been insisting he's here to stay, investors have these lingering concerns, and his political longevity, I think, ultimately really depends on how he addresses cost of living issues. Let's flip the board again and take a look at what we're seeing in JGBs as well, because it's not just about stocks or the yen. We've indeed been seeing a lot of pressure on the long end of things. Just last week on the yield on the 20 and 30 year, you'll recall, Haas, they hit those multi-decade highs amid concerns of more government spending, more tax cuts. And this week, we still have a 40-year auction to get through. So JGB is also expected to potentially post losses this week, Haas.
Avril Hong, thank you so much for that. Let's get more on the latest developments out of Japan with the country's former State Minister of Defense and Foreign Affairs, Yasuhide Nakayama. Also with us, Mittal Kotecha, Head of FX and EM Macro Strategy Asia at Barclays. Mittal, let's start with you. Market reaction pretty muted, not entirely surprising, right? It's been priced in.
Absolutely, Haslinda. I think the fact is that running into this, the polls and most of the market expected a loss. And it's exactly what we saw for Ishiba. And so now the question is what happens going forward. I tend to agree with the analysis that's been done. I think the yen has bounced a little bit in the wake of the election result, but the risks to the yen are still on the downside in the coming days and weeks, especially when you've got the dollar generally picking up momentum here. There's also a sense where, of course, you know, the yen, all that money that's repatriated hasn't really been taking place. We're not seeing a lot of money coming back into Japan per se. So it does look like the bias to the yen is still very much on the downside in the near term.
Not to mention the risk of policy paralysis given where it is right now. I mean, you can only imagine the yen goes lower from here.
That's right. Look, I think it's going to be very, very difficult for Ishiba now to push policy through. The reality, of course, an immediate focus of the market is trade talks with the US. And look, you could argue on the one hand, now the elections are out of the way, you've got a bit of an open door to have the trade talks as there was uncertainty. So we'll see that happening. But you know that Japan has been seeing a very big sticking point in the likes of autos and steel tariffs. And it's not been easy, plain sailing up until now in terms of trade discussion. So it could still be very, very tricky. And to be fair, you look at the deals that the US has done now with, say, Indonesia and Vietnam, we're talking about the upper end of 15 to 20% tariffs. I'm not sure that's acceptable for Japan.
Nakayama-san, let's get your assessment. It does seem like it is an inflection point for Japanese politics. When a party like Senseido can get 15 seats, that says a lot.
Yes. Good morning. Thank you very much for receiving me on Haslinda program. Thank you very much, my friend Milti-san. And you already know, before even interview me, Bloomberg knows everything. And I think as for what happens next, Mr. Ishiba has already stated clearly that he intends to stay on the prime minister's seat. However, many voters may see this as lacking humility or responsibility. And I believe public criticism of him will grow even stronger. The media is also likely to become much more critical on his leadership going forward. More broadly, public trust in the government as a whole is likely to erode further. And Ishiba could face what we in Japan call a fukuro dataki situation, a kind of political pile on from all sides. What makes things even more difficult is that the Ishiba administration now leads a minority government in both the lower and upper house. To pass any legislation, they will need cooperation from the oppositions. In practice, that makes governing extremely difficult, and the policy implementation could stall for the foreseeable future.
Nakayama-san, the pressure on Ishiba is not just from the people and the media, it's also within the LDP party. Sources say they're putting a lot of pressure on the Prime Minister to step down. The question now is how long can he resist before he's forced to make an exit?
Yes, this is a very, very difficult situation going on. After the Abe Shinzo killed by assassin, what LDP lost mind is what is the conservative philosophy of LDP? Why the Japanese LDP stands for? Mr. Shinzo Abe was a very strong conservative person as a leader of Japanese party, LDP. But it seems to me, even me, Mr. Ishiba little bit lean on to pro-China. So I think this time the election, all the Japanese voters feel a little bit of fear from Chinese silent invasion. For example, like we have a very close ally, the very close country and nation, freedom nation called Taiwan. But if you look at the Taiwan situation, what the Japanese leader has to do to protect and defending the democracy of Taiwan with Australia, with the United States. I don't want to see the 1997 Hong Kong again in Taiwan situation. And I don't want to see the Ukraine situation right now going on in Europe, in Asia. So this kind of foreign diplomacy or defense issue, everyone feared and everyone wants to listen the prime minister's voice from Ishiba, like Abe. But this time, voters couldn't get any words from the leader of Japan. That is a problem, I guess.
And Mito, we know it is a challenging time for Japan and the elections are pretty much risk-off for Japanese assets. I guess the next hurdles will be the 40-year auction, also CPI data. Would that be a game changer for Japanese assets?
Obviously it'll be a big focus. I'm not sure it's a game changer. What we've been seeing on the longer end of the curve has been increased pressure over recent weeks. That's also filtered into the 10-year part of the curve as well. And look, I think there is concerns about the obviously BOJ pulling back its buying, plus the increased supply that's going to be happening in the longer end. Now, of course, with the election result, there are growing prospects of more fiscal. It's not automatic, but increased fiscal stimulus at a time when the bond market is already very nervous could be very, very significant. And by the way, we were on the road last couple of weeks. This was seen as one of the biggest risks from clients across markets. So it is something a lot of investors are focusing on. If we do see the long end blow out and come under much more pressure, that would also obviously impact the yen significantly.
The thing is, a weak government usually ends up spending more. And you have inflation an issue. The government is set to spend more as well to support the people. I'm just wondering what that means for yields eventually.
Well, I think both sides, all sides actually have talked about increasing tax credits, etc., some more stimulus. It's just that the opposition had been even more than the LDP. But look, I think it's going to be nervous. I mean, it's going to, as you said, potentially be risk-off. I think we've had a reaction today that says the markets were expecting this, but further out, this is not going to be as calm, right? And I think it does seem as if that pressure is going to be ongoing. That said, look, we're not, our house view is not a blowout in the longer end. We still think things will be measured in terms of where we see the longer end of the curve move and where Japanese asset markets move. But clearly, I think until then, there'll be nervousness. And as I said, we'll also be watching what happens on trade talks. The data is going to be very, very important in Japan as well. And so there's a lot of factors we're looking at here. But the immediate focus will be on the aftermath of the elections, how that changes the landscape politically, the ability to get deals done, to get measures passed is going to be much more difficult.
And Nakayama-san, is there a sense that perhaps the weak yen, which is hovering at month's lows, and also the problem of wages that's pushing the voters to the far right? I mean, people are wanting more populist policies.
Yes. And also, this is a very difficult situation for Japan regarding the critical issue for the defense of Japan. But on the other hand, Japanese people feel like they feel fear a little bit, as I said, but they are not, how to say, they are like a peace dummy. They concerned about the overseas, but they never vote for the foreign policy or defense policy. So as Mituru-san said, I think the impact of the U.S.-Japan trade negotiation will become a more strong issue towards the end of this month. Talks are in the final stage, but I don't think Japanese government is not so good progress right now. The Japanese government negotiation at the beginning of the tariffs by the President Trump, but we should see the Chinese situation. Chinese negotiation is very smart. Chinese government, Xi Jinping knows that the Trump is a short temper. So right. They close up, they wrap up very quick. And they think like that. Beijing think even 25%, but only 3 years. But the Japanese bureaucracy system and the countryside of the statesman, like Mr. Ishiba, they are too straight, to negotiate too much with the U.S. How do you say? Study too much, big brain, and no idea, tricky idea, like Chinese. So the Japan has to wrap up very quick and be patient.
Nakayama-san, what were some of the miscalculations in the trade negotiation? What were some of the miscalculations? Was it the fact that Japan was actually looking for a full exemption from tariffs?
Yeah. Do you think our Prime Minister Ishiba can go straight forward and against the United States president? This is the answer. The strong statement, strong president is Trump. And we, the Japan, have to receive and accept that. Even we negotiation with the U.S. trade. I think I know that I can see the result. We have to receive less than 25%, but not negative, not -%. So even whatever the result, the percentage of the tariff is increasing. This is the answer. So I think Japanese have to quick wrap up the negotiation. It's more key to the market. And this wrap up quick speed negotiation is that makes good results for the Japanese economy, I guess. Now it's a very unstable.
It's almost lost. Right. And for the BOJ, it's possibly has lost any catalyst or impetus to actually move?
Well, I think the BOJ is still in wait-and-see mode, right? I mean, they will be watching the trade talks very, very closely. We still think the Bank of Japan moves in January, But of course, it could be delayed if we see an adverse trade deal or a no trade deal and tariffs being implemented that hurts economic growth. So, a number of factors to watch out for there, but we still stick with the January view for now.
All right, hang tight. Yasuhide Nakayama, former State Minister of Defense and Foreign Affairs of Japan, Mittal Kotecha of Barclays, is sticking around. Now, as we shift our focus to the Fed, with Governor Chris Waller making his pitch to succeed Jay Powell with a warning on inflation. Keep it here with us. This is Bloomberg.